For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you, thank you.
Many people are reeling from political developments in the last few weeks. First, we saw NUMSA being expelled from COSATU, and this last week's developments in Parliament. Do you think we are facing major political shift?
I think to deal first with COSATU, I think that, both of these events have been very significant. The expulsion of NUMSA, but also what happened in Parliament. I think that when they expelled NUMSA, they thought they would simply vote and make a surgical excision and get rid of NUMSA, and that's it. But I don't think they've understood the reverberations, the extreme character of expelling the biggest union in COSATU, one of the founder members of COSATU. Now, COSATU was established after a lot of negotiations, and NUMSA came from a background, what used to be called workerist background, and it took a lot of time to convince unions like that. They had been Mau before. It took a lot of time to convince unions like that to join with the others who were a part of the Congress tradition allied to the UDF and the ANC, so-called populists. Now, what I think they've not understood is that this thing is going to create massive disruption, not only in COSATU itself, whose future may be in danger, but in the labor-business relationship as well. It appears that a number of business organizations, except for the Free Market Foundation, who think it's good that you have a weaker trade union movement, but the rest of business, from what I can see, are very worried, because if they want to negotiate wages, it's important to them that the relationship between labor unions is stable. In the past, even if there were other unions in the metalworkers industry, they had a stable relationship, so they would negotiate, NUMSA would negotiate with these others, and when they met with the employers, it was possible, the employers were able to say, this is the voice of the workers. Now, if the former president of NUMSA, Cedric Gina, is establishing a new metalworkers union, which will be absorbed into COSATU, that union is not going to have a relationship of cooperation very easily with NUMSA. Yes. So you have a situation there for a start, which is problematic. Also, I don't think they have calculated whether a decision made with national office bearers will necessarily carry through to other levels of the Labour Federation. Now, NUMSA has, from the outset, said they're going to challenge this in court at a national level. They're going to challenge the expulsion. They're also going to challenge the failure to call a special Congress, which the Constitution obliges them to do, but the president of COSATU has not called that. But what they've also said to unions at other levels, we are not leaving the federation. You must attend provincial meetings of COSATU, you must attend local meetings of COSATU. Now, it may be that at those levels, these people are not going to try and kick NUMSA out. Maybe. And if they do try to kick NUMSA out, it's going to create instability. But what this suggestion I'm making relates to is that many of the unions who voted for the expulsion may not have the support at the lowest levels for expelling NUMSA. May well be that some of those people will cooperate with NUMSA at a local level, so that you may have expulsion at a national level, but cooperation at a local level or provincial level. But you may have the other situation as well, where some of NUMSA's members don't, or many of NUMSA's members may not support the decision of the national leadership. So that certainly many of them will still vote ANC, but we don't know to what extent there may be disaffection. But there is no signs of disaffection within NUMSA. And NUMSA is a very well organized trade union. That is something that is very certain, or I'd be very surprised if that's not the case. So I just think they've not calculated on the level of instability and the danger that it poses to the future of the federation. Most of the unions who are siding with NUMSA are industrial unions, whereas most of the unions who remain in COSATU are public sector unions. So for COSATU, if COSATU potentially loses all of those, it becomes a public sector union, very different from the previous shop floor tradition.
And what do you think are the implications on the developments in Parliament?
There's a lot of ways one can view this. In the first place, this whole parliamentary session since the elections has had the ANC on the back foot. First there was disruptions after the president failed to answer questions. But what we saw last week was imaginative use of the rules of Parliament with hundreds of motions. There was nothing illegal about that. There was nothing irregular about that. That is what you see, what's called filibustering, and it can sometimes go on for 12 days or even longer in the United States. And Gareth van Onselen in the Sunday Times said that the DA and EFF could have continued this for longer, or there's no reason why they should have stopped, because that would have been a way of presenting of the Nkandla report. But nevertheless, what they did, the ANC didn't know how to handle it. They had no capacity to thwart this. And in fact, it got them very angry, even though what EFF and DA did was legitimate within the rules of Parliament. We know that Lindiwe Zulu went outside and she basically wanted to beat up this EFF person. And what she was reacting to was not something that was irregular. It was completely within the rules of Parliament. Now, when they later passed on to discuss issues, and an EFF female MP called Zuma a thief and a criminal, the procedure for someone who refuses to withdraw, there are procedures and to refuses to leave the podium, there are procedures in the rules of Parliament for doing that.
Yes.
What they did instead is they brought in the riot police. They could say, no, there's no such thing as riot police, public order police. But if you are being clapped, it doesn't matter to you what it's called. It's the same experience as you had under apartheid. And this Colonel Lotz used very interesting words. He said, you will see, this is not the way, you will see the way things are done here. Now, when I was tortured in 1975, I remember them saying, now we are going to show you a thing or two. So the language of this policeman is very similar to the way the apartheid police, the language they would use in such a situation. There was no reason to call in the riot police and no reason for them to assault people. I mean, their bruises that DA MPs have got, they broke equipment, and what I think is serious is that they crossed a boundary. Parliament is supposed to be a sacred place for democracy.
Yes.
And what they did by bringing the riot police in there, and they planned this. They set aside a floor in Parliament, according to the Sunday Times, for these police, and they set this aside, and they had planned this possible intervention or actual intervention. And someone said, one of the DA, I think, said, now it makes one wonder what will happen if the ANC lose an election. I think this is a very serious day for our democracy.
That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Policy about turbulence in South African politics. Thanks, Professor.
Thank you.